Okay guys, I'm going to try to help you with limiting and excess reagents. So first of all, you'll notice this word reagents is maybe different. A reagent is really just a reactant. It's just another word. You can use those interchangeably. So if I say reagent, it means the same as a reactant. So don't get confused by that. I want you to think about making a sandwich. If you have 4 pieces of bread and you have a whole pack of lunch meat, the bread is going to limit how many sandwiches you can make. If you have 4 pieces of bread, you can only make 4 sandwiches. It doesn't matter how much meat you have, you can only make 4 sandwiches. So the bread is your limiting reagent or reactant. Your lunch meat would be your excess. You would have leftovers of that. So in a chemical reaction, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to use the amounts that they give us, and we're going to figure out which one is our limiting reagent and then which one is our excess. Once we know that, the limiting reagent is the one we always use to figure out how much product we can make. The bread was the limiting reagent. It determines how many sandwiches we can make. So I'm going to do problem 25 from page 370, I think it is, just so you can see this and use this as an example. So here's the question. It says the equation C2H4 gas plus 3 oxygen molecules produces 2 carbon dioxide molecules plus 2 waters. So there's our reaction. It looks to me like it's already balanced, so we're good to go, but we should always check that. They say if 2.70 moles of C2H4 is reacted with 6.30 moles of O2, what is the limiting reagent? So I'm going to show you a couple options for how to do this, and you have to decide what works for you. So the first option is how they have you do it in the book if you've looked at the examples there. So I'm going to notice that we've got reagent. We've got reagents. See how both of these are on the left-hand side of the arrow? They're both reactants. We just have to figure out which one is the limiting reagent. So I'm going to take the first number that they give me, and it really doesn't matter which one you choose. I usually just choose the first one. And I'm going to write it down, and I'm going to start converting. What I need to do is just like I would do with bread and lunch meat. If I had 4 pieces of bread and I wanted, 2 pieces of meat on each sandwich, I'd take and use the amount of bread that I have times the two pieces of meat. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I have 2.70 moles of C2H4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ignore the other number right now, and I'm going to use this to figure out if I have this much C2H4, how much oxygen do I need? I know I have this, but I need to figure out what I need on paper. So since I'm already in moles, I'm going to first convert to moles of oxygen because that's what I'm trying to figure out. So I want to get rid of moles of C2H4, so I'm going to put that on the bottom. There's a 1 in front of it because coefficient is 1. And I'm going to put moles of oxygen on top, and that is going to be a 3 because there's a 3 in front of it. Now, moles of C2H4 is gone. I am now 2 moles of oxygen, which is what I need. So if I do the math, I would end up with 8.1 moles of oxygen. So what this means is I need 8.1 moles of oxygen in order to have enough to make our product with 2.7 moles of C2H4. I need 8.1 moles to make this equation work. If I go now back up to the information they gave me, I only have 6.3 moles of oxygen. That's not enough. And so this 6.3 moles of oxygen is like the bread. It's going to limit how much product I can make. So this number that you calculate is what you need. When you compare it to the number given in the problem, if it is not enough, that substance, O2 in this case, is your limiting reagent. Okay, so because we need 8.1, but we only have 6.3, the oxygen is your limiting reagent. I want to show you one other option. So this is another way that you can do these problems. It's a little bit more time consuming, but it may be easier for some of you. So 2.7 moles of C2H4. What we can do instead of converting to oxygen is we can pick one of the products. So I'm going to pick CO2, and I'm going to figure out how much CO2 I can make with 2.7 moles of C2H4, just like the stoichiometry problems we've done earlier. So I'm already in moles, so I'm going to get rid of moles of C2H4, put it on the bottom, use my coefficient from the equation, and I'm going to convert to CO2, so I'm going to put 2 moles of CO2 on top. Coefficient is 2. I would be able to make 5.4 moles of CO2 with 2.7 moles of C2H4. What I'm going to do is compare that to how much I can make with the oxygen that they gave me in the problem. So if I go back up to the problem, they told me that I have 6.30 moles of oxygen. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to convert oxygen to carbon dioxide. So I'm going to put my 3 moles of oxygen on the bottom. That's my coefficient. I'm going to put 2 moles of CO2 on top, because that's what I'm trying to convert to. Moles of oxygen are gone. And when I do the math there, 6.3 times 2 divided by 3, I get 4.2 moles of CO2. What I'm saying is 2.7 moles of C2H4 can produce 5.4 moles of carbon dioxide. 6.3 moles of oxygen can produce 4.2 moles of CO2. So in this case, my limiting reagent is the one that produces the least product. I'll say that again. My limiting reagent is the one that produces the least product. So 4.2 moles of carbon dioxide is less than 5.4. That means that my limiting reagent is that O2 that we talked about already. The answer matches up with what we set up here. O2 is your limiting reagent. I just did it a different way. I figured out how much product each one could make, and then I'll write that down so you can remember it. Limiting reagent produces least amount of product. Now, next step would be, if they asked you then how much product can be produced, your answer is always going to be based on the limiting reagent. So once you decide O2 is the limiting reagent, if they ask you to do any stoichiometry from that point forward, you have to use the amount of oxygen. So you would start with the 6.30 moles of oxygen and convert that to whatever they needed. You will always use the limiting reagent in any further questions. Sorry, forgot use. In any further calculations.